9 seasons, Clinton Portis signed what was then the largest contract for a running back in NFL history. But just a year after his retirement, he found himself drowning in so much financial trouble that he was considering murder.
Picture this. You're 22 years old, you've just signed a multi-million-dollar NFL contract, and the whole world is your oyster. Private jets, mansions, everything you ever dreamed of. Now, fast forward 5 years, and you're filing for bankruptcy, living with your parents, or worse, sitting in a federal prison cell. We're talking about players like Warren Sapp, who earned $82 million and still filed for bankruptcy owing child support to 4 different women. And Travis Henry, a Pro Bowl running back who turned to substance trafficking just to pay his child support bills. Buckle up, because these stories are wild, messy, and honestly, a little bit shocking. Number 8. Vince Young. Let's kick things off with a story that has no business being this messy. Vince Young. 2006 Rose Bowl legend, 3rd overall pick, one of the most electric college football players ever, signed a rookie deal worth $25.74 million before playing a single regular season snap. Over his career, including endorsements, he pulled in an estimated $45 million. So how do you blow $45 million? According to a Sports Illustrated investigation, Young was dropping $5K per week at the Cheesecake Factory. Not a Michelin-starred restaurant, not a private chef. The Cheesecake Factory. That's nearly $250,000 a year on pasta and cheesecake. There's lavish, and then there's whatever this is. But it gets worse, and honestly, more infuriating. Young also trusted the wrong people with his money. His financial advisor allegedly misappropriated $5.5 million of his earnings, and a $1.9 million personal loan went into default. His NFL career fizzled after injuries and off-field drama. And when the Green Bay Packers picked him up in 2013, they dropped him almost immediately after reportedly realizing how out of control his life had become. By 2014, Young filed for bankruptcy. Assets, $500,000. Debts, up to $10 million. From $45 million to less than $500,000. The math doesn't lie, and neither does the embarrassment. But if you think a rogue financial advisor is a problem unique to Vince Young, wait until you hear about the Pro Bowl cornerback who went from $55 million contract to asking his parents to cover the grocery bill. Number 7. Chris McAlister. Oh, this one stings. Chris McAlister was not just a good NFL player. He was an elite one. Selected by the Baltimore Ravens in the first round of the 1999 NFL Draft, 10th overall, McAlister became one of the most feared cornerbacks in the entire league. Over his 11-year career, he made 3 Pro Bowls, was named All-Pro once, and won 2 Super Bowl rings. In 2004, right around the midpoint of his career, the man signed a $55 million contract. $55 million. By 2011, TMZ was reporting that court records showed Chris McAlister was unemployed, completely broke, and living with his parents. He was depending on his mom and dad to cover his basic living expenses. A man who once had a $55 million contract was asking his parents for grocery money. The story came to light during child support proceedings. McAlister had been trying to get the courts to lower his $11,000 per month child support obligations because he simply didn't have the funds. The exact details of where every dollar went remain murky, but the combination of a failed business venture, a Nissan car dealership that collapsed and forced him into bankruptcy, and mounting child support debts painted a very grim picture. The same lender that financed his dealership later sued him for nearly $2 million when he defaulted on loans. And here's the kicker that feels like a gut punch. Just 1 month after the Saints released him, it came out that he owed roughly $7 million to Nissan's financing arm, the exact same amount he would have earned from the Saints that very year had he not been cut. From one of the most feared defenders in the NFL to begging a judge for financial relief. The fall from grace doesn't get much more dramatic than this. Now living with your parents is one level of embarrassing. But what if the people you hired to protect your money were the very ones destroying it? and you nearly took matters into your own hands. That's the Clinton Portis story, and it is absolutely unhinged. Number 6. Clinton Portis. In 2004, Clinton Portis signed what was then the richest running back contract in NFL history. $50.5 million over 8 years with the Washington Redskins, including $17 million guaranteed. He was brilliant on the field, legendary in the locker room, and one of the most entertaining personalities in the league. By 2015, just 5 years after retiring, he filed for bankruptcy. The filing showed debt to the IRS at $390,000, casino debts at MGM Grand at $287,000, and the Borgata at $170,000, child support owed to 4 different women at $412,000, and $500,000 owed to his own mother. In an interview with Sports Illustrated, Portis revealed his financial advisors had defrauded him out of millions. He said, and this is where things get very dark, that he had actually had violent thoughts about one of those advisors. He said he had to take a step back from the edge and choose not to go down that road. That is not a figure of speech. That is a man saying he nearly committed homicide over financial betrayal. Then, in 2019, Portis was charged with federal healthcare fraud for allegedly exploiting the NFL's Player Health Reimbursement Plan. The following year, wire fraud charges were added. From the richest RB contract in history to federal indictment. Hollywood couldn't try to script this. Federal charges are one kind of desperation. But what about a player so broke that he turned to actual substance trafficking just to keep up with child support? Enter one of the most jaw-dropping cautionary tales in NFL history. Number 5. Travis Henry. This one is something else entirely. Travis Henry was a running back drafted by the Buffalo Bills in the second round of the 2001 NFL Draft. He was a Pro Bowl selection in 2002 and at one point ranked among the top rushers in Bills history. Over the course of his NFL career, stints with the Bills, the Tennessee Titans, and the Denver Broncos, he earned an estimated $43.1 million in total career earnings. So what went wrong? Well, everything. But let's start with the child support. Travis Henry fathered at least 11 children with 10 different women. That's a whole football team. According to a 2009 New York Times report, when the count was still at 9, his attorney estimated that his annual child support obligations totaled at least $170,000 per year. For someone who was no longer collecting NFL paychecks, that number is crushing. In March 2009, Henry was arrested in Polk County, Florida, and charged specifically with failing to pay $16,600 in child support for one of his children. The man went to jail not for anything flashy, but because he couldn't keep up with the mountain of obligations he'd created. But here is where this story crosses from sad into deeply shocking. When his NFL career dried up and his money evaporated, Henry didn't sell cars or open a restaurant like many other broke athletes. According to court documents and his own testimony, Henry stated that he turned to substance trafficking specifically to help cover his child support payments. He was arrested by federal substance agents in October 2008 after allegedly being the money guy in a coke trafficking ring that moved hard substances between Colorado and Montana. He pleaded guilty in 2009 to a single count of conspiracy to traffic substance and was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Let that sink in. A former Pro Bowl running back who made over $53 million once told a court that he sold hard substances to pay his child support. That sentence should not exist in reality, and yet, here we are. Henry was reinstated by the NFL in 2012 after his release from prison, but as ESPN reported, no team offered him a contract. The comeback never happened. He rushed for 6,086 yards and 38 touchdowns in 90 NFL games, a solid legacy on the field. Off it, the story is a spiraling tragedy defined by choices that compounded upon each other until there was nothing left to fall back on. If child support and poor choices are one road to financial ruin, another paved road straight to bankruptcy is the one lined with bad business investments. Our next player learned that the hard way to the tune of $25 million in losses. Number 4. Mark Brunell. Mark Brunell had a long, respectable NFL career. A quarterback who played over 17 seasons, Brunell was known for his work with the Jacksonville Jaguars, where he helped build the franchise into a legitimate playoff contender in the late 1990s. He earned multiple Pro Bowl selections, had a strong arm, and was considered one of the better quarterbacks of his generation during his peak years. Over the course of his career, he earned an estimated $50 million in salary. In 2010, Mark Brunell filed for bankruptcy. At the time of filing, he had around $5 million in assets, but over $25 million in liabilities. So where did roughly $45 million go? The answer? Bad business, bad advice, and one very ill-fated obsession with Whataburger. After retiring, Brunell invested heavily in real estate ventures that ultimately went south. He also purchased ownership stakes in approximately a dozen Whataburger restaurant locations, mostly in the Jacksonville, Florida area. It's not an inherently terrible idea. Fast food franchise ownership can be lucrative under the right conditions. But almost half of those locations ended up failing and closing. The real estate market collapse around the 2008 recession didn't help. Brunell, like many of his peers, had leveraged his name and fortune into business deals that were overextended and underprepared. Without a solid financial team, without diversification, and without a fallback plan, $50 million melted into a mountain of debt. To his credit, Brunell has spoken publicly about his failures and has not shied away from the hard truths. He has worked to rebuild his life and has reportedly found stability since then. But the numbers don't soften the blow. $50 million in earnings, $25 million in debt, a lesson learned the absolute hardest way possible. Bad restaurant investments, you say? Our next Hall of Famer didn't even make it to retirement before the business world came for him, and the 2008 recession finished the job. Number 3. Dermontti Dawson. Dermontti Dawson is considered one of the greatest offensive linemen in NFL history. 7 Pro Bowls, 6 All-Pro selections, a Super Bowl ring, a 2012 Pro Football Hall of Fame induction. He was once the highest-paid offensive lineman in Steelers history. In 2010, Dawson filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Assets, just under $1.5 million. Debts, nearly $70 million. A number so large, it barely seems real for an individual filing. The cause was real estate, a series of investments that were already on shaky ground before the 2008 financial crisis hit and turned shaky into a full collapse. Multiple lawsuits followed. Credit card debt piled up. The combination of bad timing and bad deals erased everything he'd spent 2 decades building on the field. What makes Dawson's story particularly haunting is that he did everything right on the field. He earned his Hall of Fame induction. He was a model professional. And yet, the financial decisions made off the field, particularly in a volatile real estate market during one of the worst economic downturns in American history, wiped out the wealth he had spent his entire career building. It is a sobering reminder that talent, work ethic, and even Hall of Fame credentials offer zero protection against financial illiteracy and the wrong investment decisions. A Hall of Famer buried under $70 million. And yet the next story might top it, because our number 2 player went bankrupt while mopping prison floors for 12 cents an hour. Number 2, Michael Vick. There is no list about NFL financial ruin that can exclude Michael Vick. His story is one of the most dramatic rises, falls, and, to his credit, rebounds in American sports history. At his peak, Michael Vick was one of the most electrifying players the NFL had ever seen. He played quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons, and in 2004 signed what was at the time the richest contract in NFL history, won $30 million over 10 years. He was a cultural phenomenon, a video game character brought to life, a player so gifted that he made defenders look foolish on a weekly basis. The endorsements poured in, and his jersey was one of the best-selling in the league. Then came July 2007. Federal authorities charged Michael Vick with running an illegal interstate dogfighting operation known as Bad News Kennels out of a property he owned in Virginia. The details that emerged during the investigation were brutal and disturbing. Vick eventually pleaded guilty, was sentenced to 23 months in federal prison, and reported to Leavenworth in November 2007. While in prison, Vick was assigned to janitorial duty and earned 12 cents per hour. The man who had signed a $130 million contract was mopping floors for less than $1 a day. The financial picture was equally grim. In July 2008, while still incarcerated, Vick filed for bankruptcy from behind bars. The filing revealed tens of millions of dollars in debt. His property was seized. His endorsements evaporated overnight. The NFL suspended him indefinitely. It seemed, to most observers, like a career and a financial life completely and irreversibly destroyed. But here's where Vick's story diverges from everyone else on this list. When the Philadelphia Eagles signed him in 2009 to a one-year deal, he went to work. He rebuilt his image, put in the performances, and earned a second contract. He eventually paid back every single one of his creditors, completing the repayment in 2017. He now works for Fox Sports and has been involved in multiple charitable causes. The bankruptcy, the prison sentence, the 12 cents an hour reality, all of it happened. But so did the comeback. Whether you're a Vick fan or not, the financial resurrection is objectively remarkable. Michael Vick's downfall was triggered by a criminal case. But our number one story is about a player who had every advantage: fame, earnings, multiple income streams, and still somehow ended up at the absolute bottom. This is the story that should make every young NFL player sit down and listen carefully. Number 1. Warren Sapp. Warren Sapp might be the most stunning entry on this entire list, because unlike several of the other players here, Sapp was not just an NFL star, he was a superstar, a personality, and a media presence who seemed to be everywhere after retiring. His post-career pivot to television, specifically as an analyst on the NFL Network's NFL Total Access, and later on Dancing with the Stars, suggested a man who had successfully navigated the transition many players fail at. He was loud, colorful, undeniably entertaining, and apparently deeply broke. On the field, Sapp was a dominant force. The defensive tackle played most of his career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he was a central piece of one of the greatest defenses in NFL history. He was a 7-time Pro Bowler, a Super Bowl champion with Tampa in Super Bowl 37, and was later inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2013. Over his career, he earned an estimated $82 million in salary and endorsements. In April 2012, Warren Sapp filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. At the time of filing, he listed assets worth approximately $6.5 million and debts of $7 million. The creditors listed in his filing told a story all by themselves. He owed money to the IRS, he owed child support to 4 different women, and he had piled up substantial medical bills. But the details surrounding Sapp's financial situation go even further than the bankruptcy filing. In 2015, Sapp was fired from the NFL Network after being arrested in Phoenix, Arizona, on charges related to soliciting a prostitute and assaulting 2 women. He was released without charge on the assault accusations, but the NFL Network terminated his contract immediately. Whatever income stream that represented, gone. And there were reports prior to his bankruptcy that Sapp's lifestyle had been extraordinarily expensive. A man who earned $82 million should never be filing for bankruptcy with only $6.5 million in assets. The gap represents decades of spending, failed investments, failed relationships with financial consequences, and a total absence of long-term financial planning, despite having every resource available to do it properly. Sapp's story sits at number 1 on this list, not because his fall was the most dramatic in absolute dollar terms, but because it represents the sheer scale of what is possible to lose. $82 million, a Hall of Fame career, a television presence, brand recognition, and still bankruptcy. Still debts to the IRS. Still child support obligations to 4 different women. Still a $7 million hole where a legacy of wealth should have been. 8 players, hundreds of millions of dollars collectively, and nearly all of it gone. According to Sports Illustrated, roughly 4 out of 5 retired NFL players face bankruptcy or serious financial distress within 2 years of leaving the game. These aren't isolated horror stories. This is a pattern. The thread connecting every single entry on this list? It wasn't bad luck. It was financial illiteracy, misplaced trust, lifestyle inflation, and the deeply dangerous belief that the money would never stop coming. Vince Young dropped $5,000 a week at a chain restaurant. Travis Henry sold substance to pay child support. Clinton Portis was involved in a case that escalated into a life-threatening situation tied to financial fraud. Warren Sapp burned through $82 million and still had nothing left. The average NFL career lasts fewer than 4 seasons. The window to build generational wealth is brutally short. The predators are relentless, and the pressure to spend is constant. These 8 players learned that lesson the hardest way possible. Making money and keeping money are 2 completely different skills, and confusing the 2 can cost you absolutely everything. Drop a comment below. Which story shocked you the most? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. More of these are coming.